be prepared, that was the Boy Scouts' motto. The Scout law was a bit different though. It said that a Boy Scout had to be reliable, loyal, helpful, friendly, polite, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, respectful, and also naive, or in other words, stupid, idiotic, and trusting. Nick was left speechless after checking the email on his wife's iPhone. He usually never snooped around her phone, and she knew that well enough not to bother with any extra protection. After all, he was a Boy Scout, he didn't go around invading people's privacy. But Nick's old lady is gonna be out of town in a couple of weeks. He's trying to remember the name of the hotel she mentioned before, but he wasn't really listening. He's trying to avoid a fight about why he wasn't paying attention. Lately, these arguments have been happening more often. This trip will be the longest time they've been apart since they got hitched 5 years ago. Nick's been thinking about doing something sweet like sending flowers. What better way to show his woman how much he cares about her than with a nice gesture like that? So, she got flowers from him while she was thousands of miles away in Paris, the city of love. Yeah, it's all romantic and stuff, but she wasn't gonna fall for him. Nah, it had to be Dwayne, who was also on a trip. After hacking into his wife's phone, Nick found himself reading some personal emails between her and Dwayne. They were chatting about strolling along the Seine at night and taking a boat ride on the river under the moonlight. Then they went and had amazing sex all night, which was almost as shocking as the affair itself. What's even crazier is that Nick's wife, Linda, and her lover, Dwayne, were exchanging messages using their work email accounts. She really should have been more careful. Does Dwayne actually like Nick? Linda was a lawyer and Dwayne was a paralegal at her firm. All three of them have been involved in analyzing tons of documents for big legal cases, where teams of lawyers and paralegals have to go through every single one of the hundreds of thousands of emails that are being considered for document discovery. So basically, the deal was that some dumbass were fooling around, and the lawyers were scrambling to see if it had any relevance to the case and how to cover it up. Truth is, Nick wasn't listening when Linda mentioned the trip and hotel name because he sensed something fishy. He didn't know what it was at the time, but his gut feeling was giving him chills. Been in the legal game for 5 years now. Listening to clients' bullshit and lawyers skirting around the truth by not spilling everything honed his listening skills. Something felt off when Linda mentioned the trip, claiming it was just a dull arbitration process that would keep them too busy to enjoy the sights. She didn't even bother looking at him when she said it, which seemed sketchy. She knew Paris was one of Nick's top cities and they had always talked about going together since she had never been. Nick caught on to her game. Answer weird, but he never thought it would be this bad. The email he was reading felt like a dagger to his heart. Why not just dump the Boy Scout so we can hang out more without any drama? Dwayne wrote last night. I feel comfortable with him, Linda replied. So why are you sneaking around with me every chance you get? Nick had no clue what to do next, other than forwarding all the emails to his inbox and printing out the email conversation. So, Nick, the lawyer, printed out the emails just in case, you know. He wanted to make sure he had evidence. After that, he started thinking about what to do next. He knew he had to be careful not to harm anyone. That's what being a lawyer is all about, using your brain, not your muscles. He had to act fast because Linda was out jogging and would be back soon. But before he could think too much, he had to finish his task and find a hotel. However, things weren't as easy as he thought. He was trying to send some flowers but didn't know why he needed that info. He just knew he had to have it. Maybe 'cause there's a Target near the Eiffel Tower, like a 5-minute walk from the International Chamber of Commerce where Linda and Dwayne are gonna be working on their arbitration case with the rest of the team. At least when those two lovebirds got some free time. Once he found the hotel, he had to hop on the computer real quick and look up Virginia divorce law. He remembered a few things from the bar exam 5 years ago, but it's always good to brush up on that stuff. Finding out your spouse cheated was a good reason to split up and could mess with stuff like spousal support and splitting up your stuff. But saying your partner knew about the affair and still hooked up with them and kept living together was her excuse. So he had to leave the house ASAP without causing a scene. He planned to blindside her with no warning and take control of the situation. There wasn't room left in this marriage, so he had to start telling lies that went against the Boy Scout law. But hey, it was war, right? Churchill once said that truth is so precious during wartime that it needs to be protected by a bunch of lies. Nick's lies were gonna come in handy now for a greater cause. And hey, none of them were sworn in under oath anyways. He went up to the main bedroom and started packing his stuff. He was done pretty quickly and put his suitcases by the front door. He almost had all the important documents he needed from the bank and credit cards. 401k and IRA statements, car titles, pay stubs, mortgage documents, and Linda's student loan balance. When she came back from her run, he heard her in the kitchen. As he got up from his basement office, he made sure to look tired and grumpy. When he saw his wife, her shoulder-length brown hair was tied back in a ponytail. She looked fine, but he found her repulsive. He already knew that love was over. "I'm going to Paris," he said with a sarcastic smile. The color drained from her face. Linda's face went white when she heard the news from Paris, Virginia. Her shocked look vanished as Sven told Nick that we have to testify in an insurance case and get a witness ready. Apparently, we just lost a motion in court and the judge is angry, throwing off the whole investigation timeline. I'll be traveling for a few weeks, but I'll try to swing by every now and then to check on poor Linda. Nick mentioned that he would rather work at your company in Paris. He noticed a look of worry on her face, but then she smiled and told him to send over his resume. She joked that maybe he had the right experience for them to consider hiring him. Linda's law firm was ranked higher than Nick's, which made her feel a bit guilty. She tried to hug him, but he quickly turned and went back to his office before she could get close. The memory of him slapping her in the face started to haunt him, and he wasn't sure he could handle it. Linda asked Sven what he wanted for dinner, but he said he couldn't stay and would grab something on his way. Sven was going crazy and wanted to leave immediately, so he rushed around the kitchen. Linda followed him to the door, looking a bit worried as he grabbed his suitcases and headed out. She pursed her lips for a goodbye kiss, apologizing for possibly catching a cold that morning and having a sore throat. She didn't want Linda to catch anything, so she followed him to the door. "Hey, when you coming back with the car loaded?" "Probably not until Friday. We're heading to Roanoke after Paris, then gotta go to Baltimore next week." Maybe he was getting even more paranoid, but he could almost hear her brain working as he saw her look away, like she was already planning for when he's gone. He waved and backed out of the driveway, hoping she'd just think he's busy with work and mad about being called in on a Saturday. His fake act wasn't fooling anyone. Nick can't handle much right now, but he's pretty sure she's already thinking about inviting Dwayne over. He kept driving until he reached a shopping center with a coffee shop. Like a typical lawyer, he found it easier to think when he wrote things down. As he finished his coffee, he started making a to-do list. He stopped for a minute and realized he had never even considered reconciliation. That wasn't on the table, it was all about payback. The only question was how much payback. His phone started ringing. Phone rang and interrupted him. He didn't recognize the number, so he answered impatiently. "Mr. Buford. I'm Sam Granger. I don't think we've met, but I'll cut to the chase. I got your number from the internet. I buy old houses and tear them down to build mansions. I know, everyone hates what I do, but they don't hate me as much when I give them a check." Granger spoke so fast that Nick didn't have time to react, other than to think that the house wasn't old, it was cozy. He was all like, "I'm gonna tear it down," but then he came to his senses and was like, "I wanna buy your house so I can tear it down." He mentioned maybe putting up a shopping center, but who knows how long it'll take with permits and all that. "I make my money by closing deals fast, so I can offer you a good price if you and your wife are thinking about selling." Nick struggled to hide a grin, while Linda picked their house right away. Before they tied the knot, it was just an old ranch. But it had a gorgeous yard right next to some woods with a creek running through it. It was near the highways but still peaceful. What really sold her was the treehouse in the yard, just across from the master bedroom window. She was all about that kid-friendly vibe. Nick, on the other hand, was all about the price and the fact that it was only a 20-minute drive to the subway parking lot, with a 30-minute train ride to work. Moving to this area was pretty easy, Mr. Granger. I'll be out of town for a few days, so I can't promise you'll be able to get into the property. Give me a call if you need to, but I don't really need to see the inside since it's a total mess. I've already checked out the outside of the house. Can we meet on Sunday morning, Sam? Sure thing. By the way, I'll probably close the deal myself using my wife's power of attorney since she's swamped with work right now. No problem, I'll give you the necessary form. Got it, I'll make a note of the address and start checking it out. So, the plan: she was cool with her Boy Scout, right? It's because Linda didn't realize that old Lord Baden-Powell was actually using military intelligence as a blueprint for his boys' skills, like sneaking around, being clever, and having confidence. Basically, setting up surprise attacks so she won't know what hit her until it's too late. But first, he needed to do some recon. So, he just casually put his empty coffee cup down on the table and dipped out to the car for some alone time. He grabbed his phone and I called up Frank, and when he picked up, I told him I needed a favor right away. Frank Berry used to be a private eye before he spent 5 years doing corporate law. Nick always made sure to do some pro bono work on the side, helping out folks who couldn't afford legal help. It was his way of being a decent human being, and it also gave him some hands-on experience in court that his regular job didn't offer. One of his old law school buddies suggested that Frank lend a hand with a messy divorce case. So there was this case with a stepdad who was messing with his stepdaughter. Frank's proof got the dude off the hook after the cops dropped the ball, and that proof also helped them get a quick divorce. Frank heard Nick break it down, and he was like, "You really think your wife's gonna let him in your bed tonight? Is she really that full of herself? She got all high and mighty after being a top student in law school. Thinks she's infallible. I'll handle it myself. I owe you one for the Rivera divorce mess. Hey, I'm getting tons of good press and my phone won't stop ringing, but I'm loving it. By the way, Frank, Nick mentioned there's a treehouse in the backyard that you might want to check out. The windows in there give you a direct view into the master bedroom, and she likes to keep the curtains open while she does her thing. Used to bug me, but hey, whatever floats her boat, right? To get there, just cross the forest and jump over the street. It's a bit of a trek, especially at night with no fences or dogs around, but there's a service road on the other side where you can park. Thanks. If you're cool with it, I'm gonna set up a camera outside pointing at the front of the house to see who's coming and going. Oh, and you're hiring Harry for a divorce, right? I'm guessing you want a divorce. Yes and yes, fine. I know how much he loves all that paperwork and stuff. If you're right, we'll find out soon enough. Nick then called Harry. Is this about the law school reunion, Nick? I've already gotten 5 calls asking for donations. No, I want to hire you. Linda's cheating on me and I'm ready to set fire to all her stuff. After Nick spilled the beans to Harry, he said to come over tomorrow. I know it's Sunday, but I still have some paperwork to deal with at the office. As I was getting ready to leave, we might as well take action. It's clear that you know cheating is not okay. Frank already has solid proof of her cheating. The toughest part will be fighting for a fair financial settlement. She's a lawyer at a big firm, so she'll have the upper hand. Nick told me he's got the resources to handle this situation, and his colleagues are giving him advice. He said to leave it to him, and he thinks they can figure it out like adults. So, does that mean you're not going to cause chaos? Alright, let's see what you can come up with. His last call was a bit more polite. Hey Maggie, this is Nick. But when there was no response, he got a bit frustrated. Maggie, you sly devil, it's good to hear from you too, darling. What do you want after all these years? I need your help after all this time, he finally admitted. Linda was your sidekick, man. Let me tell you, she went wild, like, totally unexpected. I can't even wrap my head around it, it's so dumb. Did you catch that everything is in quotes? I can't be there for you in that way right now. I'm seeing someone and I know he's a good dude. I'm really sorry, like, we messed around and it messed up our friendship. And I'm sorry I let Linda come between us when I thought we might have a shot at being friends again. But now, I need you back in my life, as a friend. Hey Nick, what do you need help with? She asked. There was a moment of silence on the line, followed by laughter. I agree, she said after calming down, but he could still hear the smile in her voice. You always make me laugh, thank you Maggie. When things calm down, you'll have to introduce me to Mr. Lucky so I can congratulate him on his excellent taste and invite you both to dinner. It's a date, she said. He needed a place to lay low for a while, so he found an extended stay hotel outside the Beltway in Fairfax, far enough away. Nick and Linda always hang out at the same places where they wouldn't be caught, and then he went to grab some food even though he wasn't really hungry. He knew he needed something in his stomach to soak up all the booze he was planning to down. There was a restaurant called El Mariachi across the street from the hotel. When the hostess sat him in a booth, he noticed the bartender was giving him a look. He looked kind of familiar, but Nick brushed it off. He had bigger things to worry about at the moment, like deciding what to order from the menu. So, this place was trying to pass off as Mexican, but most Americans couldn't tell the difference. He decided to go for some cheap tequila with his meal, knowing he was gonna regret it the next day. But he saw it as part of the cleansing process. The waitress then brought over a fancy tequila from the top shelf, and when Nick looked at her, she just motioned towards the bartender, who gave him a nod. Nick nodded back, poured himself a big drink, and the bartender came back. Nick took a minute to recognize the bartender as he was busy serving other customers. He remembered seeing him at Rivera's divorce hearing and the criminal trial Nick was involved in. The bartender always sat alone in the back row, no one ever sat next to him. One day, Sonia, the daughter of one of his clients, hugged him. When Nick asked Sonia who he was, she got really quiet and just said he was a family friend. Nick ate in silence, jotting down notes on a notepad and sipping on tequila after the waitress cleared the table. Nick finished his meal, then headed to the bathroom. He felt a bit wobbly, like he was on a boat, so he leaned against the wall while taking care of business. When he returned to his seat, he tried to act cool and confident, but then he saw the bartender sitting there. "Hey, Nick. Good to see you," the bartender said, reaching out to shake Nick's hand enthusiastically. Nick sat down, curious about what the bartender had to say. "Thanks for helping my cousin out with her crappy husband," the bartender finally said. Nick nodded, grateful for the recognition. Nick was trying to say it was all bullshit and he was just doing what he could, but the bartender wasn't having it. He told Nick that he had been beaten up real bad in prison. Apparently, they don't think he'll be able to walk or eat properly again. The bartender had a smirk on his face as he broke the news to Nick. It sent shivers down Nick's spine as he stared at the bartender. "I never heard about that," Nick said. The bartender just shrugged and said, "That's old news. What brings you to El Mariachi alone on a Saturday night? Where's your lovely wife, Nick?" Bartender looked Nick right in the eyes, still smiling. It wasn't a smirk or anything, more like a knowing smile. Nick was puzzled as to why the bartender asked such a weird question. How did he even know Nick was married? Then it hit Nick, Linda had unexpectedly shown up at one of his court hearings and planted a kiss on him afterwards. The bartender must have still been hanging around the courtroom. "We've got some issues with her," Nick admitted. He didn't see the point in lying or keeping secrets, like she's out there having fun with someone else again. Nick was shook when the bartender pointed out his notebook with some sketchy stuff in it. The bartender basically said, "Bro, don't be writing down your secrets and leaving them out in the open like that." The notebook had notes about cheating, drawings of Dwayne getting stabbed, and the name Linda with a circle and slash around it. There was also a to-do list with "burn the" on it. Nick just shrugged and admitted he had crappy security, but at least he didn't spill any real juicy info. "Hey man, when it comes to customer data, you gotta ask yourself, what do you really want? I mean, what's your ultimate revenge, other than money? So, what's your deal, Nick? What would you want more than anything in the world?" Nick didn't even have to think about it. He said he wants to punch her nose so hard it breaks, and then smack her in the face so hard both her eyes turn black. She's got a pretty face and really expressive eyes, but he wants to ruin them. The bartender's smile got even bigger. He laughed and shook his head, saying, "You my friend. People who seek revenge and end up in jail ain't thinking straight. You don't want to be locked up, unless it's for visiting clients, right?" The bartender stopped and gave Nick a quick look. Nick nodded. "But maybe I can help you out. You helped my cousin out with her issue. She could have come to me for help, but for some reason, she didn't. You were there for her though." Nick tried to cut in, but the bartender continued. "Sure, he asked Frank to gather evidence, but Nick made the cops do all the heavy lifting. It was no big deal when he asked his buddy, a former assistant U.S. attorney, to have a chat with the prosecutor and make sure they were treating the criminal case right. Nick showed up with his client just to make sure she was being treated with respect. Her divorce was pretty standard stuff after her husband got busted in a criminal case. The prosecutor didn't take Nick's objection seriously. "You gotta get that we're helping regular folks here," he said. "My cousin is a big deal, I owe you one for my whole family. I always repay my debts. Looks like you could use a hand. Nick stared at him. Sorry, I don't remember your name. The bartender's smile turned into a creepy grin. Some folks call me El Diablo, the devil. The bartender nodded. That's what the haters call me. But to my buddies, I'm Jose Garcia. Now it was Nick's turn to grin. What do I gotta do to get a favor from the devil? Sell my soul. El Diablo smiled. Nick vanished, no smile. Be serious, you're a lawyer, no soul. He smiled again, joking. Call it professional courtesy, Mr. Nick. Just give me your address, wife's name, and her daily routine. What's the plan? I have some ideas, but how about ignorance is bliss? You need to stay clueless and update me on your whereabouts for the next few months. Get a burner phone to stay in touch and ditch the "Hey man, just give me your digits" and then bounce. It's probably best if you don't come back here again. Nick told Diablo about hiring a private investigator, his plan to lay low until Linda went to France, and Linda's travel plans. El Diablo knew about the hotel in Paris but didn't spill where he got the info from. Just one thing, Nick, is there any chance of making things right, forgiving, showing mercy? I don't want to hear you backtrack later and say you changed your mind. El Diablo stared straight into Nick's eyes, his smile vanished and his expression turned serious. Nick met his gaze and took a deep breath. He took a deep breath and took a moment to check his feelings. The way ahead was clear. He was just a regular guy, and for him, trust and loyalty were the most important things. They were what ended his marriage with Linda. Something in his mind switched when he thought of love, turning it into hate. Looking back on it now, he didn't really care anymore. It wasn't the right time for that. El Diablo relaxed and told himself not to worry about anything. The waitress brought the bill, and El Diablo shooed her away, but let Nick tip her generously. He also allowed Nick to take a bottle of tequila with him. He told him, but warned him to slow down. He needed a clear mind for battle. Somehow, Nick woke up at a decent time on Sunday morning without too much of a hangover. He got to Harry's law office at 10 a.m. and found Frank already there. Sorry, Nick, Frank said. She definitely had sex with that guy in your bed. He was there 2 hours after you called me and he was still there when I left this morning. We got a really good quality video. I made you a copy, but you might not want to watch it. Harry interrupted him, saying, You better not look. I don't want you to do. Nick said not to stress if we do something dumb and end up getting arrested. He took the DVD from Frank and asked for the lowdown. I went up to that treehouse just like he told me to, and they were all over each other. I got some really good shots of their faces and, well, the rest of their bodies. They were obviously having sex, but it seemed more physical than emotional. They barely talked. I'm not sure if this changes anything for you. But man, they both had some serious stamina. Thanks for making me feel even worse. Sorry. By the way, I know Linda personally from that party you threw. So, last year we were trying to figure out who this guy was that's been hanging around with her. Turns out his name is Dwayne Martin. We know they're working together, but we're not sure how long it's been going on. But, I gotta say, it's pretty obvious that they're up to something. Oh, and we've got a camera hidden in a tree nearby that's recording their comings and goings from the driveway and garage. I'll send you a link so you can watch the live stream on our secure server. I've already talked to Harry and I'm gonna write up a report and some supporting documents for him to file. Sorry man, Frank said bye to Harry and Nick and bounced. So, what's the move? Harry asked. File for divorce citing adultery, but don't serve her. Harry looked at Nick with a blank face. Trust me, Harry, when I hear that, it makes my stomach turn. I don't want you doing anything dumb here. I have a feeling it'll all go down easier than you think. Harry winced. Just file it on Monday afternoon before the court office shuts down. Give me the case number when you do. Just leave the rest to me, but remember Nick, I'm not into criminal law, and I'm not very good at it anyway. So if you ever get into trouble, I can't help you out. You might be pleasantly surprised, Nick said as he walked out the door. Nick's next stop was to meet Sam Granger. It was a super productive meeting where Nick found out they could sell the house for over $100,000 more than the mortgage, all without paying real estate agent commissions. Linda would be thrilled if she only knew. Nick promised to come back with the necessary paperwork as soon as possible. Nick sealed the deal and left Sam's office. He checked his phone, but there were no messages or calls from her. She must still be hanging out with Dwayne. Nick saw this as his chance to call his boss, Sven, and tell him he needed 2 weeks off or he would quit. Sven freaked out because Nick was the only one who knew what was happening with the current projects, so he agreed. Luckily for Sven, business was slow at the moment, so he could give Nick a break. Nick had set the stage for his time off to be approved. Nick had some stuff to take care of at his hotel on Monday evening. Linda left him some voicemails on Sunday and Monday evening, but he didn't bother responding. He was just saving up his energy for Tuesday morning. Thanks to Frank's camera outside the house, Nick knew that Dwayne had crashed there on Monday night. And based on Dwayne's previous stay from Sunday evening to Monday morning, it was likely he would peace out around 8 a.m. on Tuesday. Linda was getting ready for work and leaving around 8:30 a.m. So, at 7 in the morning, Nick walked in through the front door and yelled, "Darling, I'm home." He heard a sudden noise upstairs, and then Linda came down the stairs in her robe, looking messy and shocked. "Honey, what a surprise," she said, trying to sound happy but barely holding it together, clearly on the brink of a full-blown panic. "I thought you weren't coming until Friday." "You didn't answer my calls," Nick replied cheerfully, pretending not to notice the 2 glasses of wine left out. Linda walked into the living room and went straight to the dining room. She stood in the doorway, watching Nick, trying to figure out how to stop him from going upstairs where Dwayne was hiding. A knock on the door startled her, and Nick asked her to open it. He started spreading out papers on the table, acting like he didn't notice as Linda gathered her nerves and went to answer the door. She half expected the bailiff to be there with divorce papers, but instead it was Maggie who barged in right away. Linda just walked in and was like, "Hey." She was curious watching Maggie sit down at the dining table and open her suitcase. "Sorry, babe," Nick said, "I don't know when I'll be back on the air. And you know I can't have you going on a trip without updating your powers of attorney, just in case something goes south and we need to handle some money or health stuff. Oh, and I had a few moments over the weekend and got a lead on refinancing my mortgage at a killer rate. Hey, we got a good deal on this trip since we're both going. I figured this was our only chance to do it. Sorry for the short notice," he said, trying to look sorry. "Who's this?" Linda asked, pointing at Maggie. When the vein in her temple stopped throbbing so hard, Nick explained, "I'm Maggie. Maggie's a notary." Linda visibly relaxed, still hiding a lover upstairs, but things weren't totally crazy yet. "You, my Boy Scout, always prepared," she said with a grin as she sat down, though her eyes were still cautious. "It's just who I am." "Hey babe," he gave Linda a pen and started spreading out the papers in front of her. "The flags with arrows show you where to sign. Take your time and read the documents if you want." "I trust you," Linda said with a big smile, quickly signing all the papers in front of her. He prayed to God that she would do it, because otherwise, he was screwed. But as they say, he who dares, wins. As Linda signed each document, Nick laid them out and handed them to Maggie, who lined them up and notarized them. "Mrs. Buford, do you have a photo ID?" asked Maggie. Linda stood up from the. Maggie and Nick had to hold in their laughter when Linda put her purse on the table. Linda showed her ID, Maggie snapped a pic and took notes in her journal. Linda offered coffee, but Nick and Maggie said no thanks. Maggie finished signing the documents in her notary book while Nick organized everything in folders. Linda kept looking up, waiting for Nick to make a move. Figuring out what to do next, Maggie packed up her stuff and smiled at Nick when Linda wasn't paying attention. Nick then bailed Linda out by saying he had a conference call and needed to go to his man cave office to do it. Linda felt relieved, as she now had time to get Dwayne out and clean up any evidence of him before Nick came back upstairs. Nick went downstairs to make her think she was still fooling him, pretending not to hear anything. You hear those loud footsteps as Dee ran down the stairs, or the creaky door opening Southwest DWI could drive off. But when Nick heard the shower running in the master bathroom, he grabbed his stuff, walked out the basement door, and drove away without saying a word to his wife. 2 hours later, after a big breakfast at the diner, Nick was in Harry's office. Harry looked surprised. "So you're saying you made your wife sign some form to file for divorce and waive all future rights?" "Okay, So you're saying that you got your wife and her lawyer to sign off on a property settlement agreement that gives you everything from the sale of your house, cars, and jewelry, lets you manage your stuff, and lets you keep your retirement accounts without paying any alimony. And you're cool with all that? She still makes more money than me, based on these papers. She said she's okay with leaving the marriage with only around $125,000 from her retirement savings and about $200,000 of her student loan debt from law school. She's always been a generous person. Harry gave Nick a suspicious look and went back to looking at the papers on his desk. And you even got her to sign a document admitting to cheating and confessing that her lover was upstairs in the bedroom when she signed it. I was with her all night after we hooked up the night before. Are you seriously trying to tell me that her statement backs up the part in the email where she mentioned staying with her boyfriend because he's better in bed? Is that really what you're saying, lawyer? Nick didn't show any emotions on his face, at least not that he could hide. Don't disrespect me, the papers speak for themselves. Harry glanced at the papers, then up at Nick, trying to hold back a grin. He turned away in his chair. Damn this, I'll take the file. You're a well-respected lawyer and a buddy from law school, how was I supposed to know you pulled all this crap? I thought it was all good, Your Honor. I'm so confused, I was totally shocked when my client betrayed my trust. If anyone deserves to lose their license, it's Nicholas A. Buford. Can't you see what I'm getting at, Nick? If necessary, will this notary confirm that Linda signed all of this? Yes, she will. Will she testify that Linda? Hey, make sure you look over those papers carefully. I don't want to try and sway anyone's testimony, but Linda is a pro at trial, so I trust she gave the documents a good once-over. I'm sure the notary will confirm that she saw Linda go through and sign each one. I can't really say anything else about her mindset on understanding the documents. All right, Harry said, I'll make a record of all this today along with Frank's. Hey, I'll try to grab the affidavit and report with photos and a DVD from the electronic file. We don't want this getting out in the news, do we? No way, said Nick. Linda's off to Paris in a couple of weeks. The longer we keep this under wraps, the better. Do you know anyone at the district court? Remember Seth? Harry asked. He's a year behind us and he's struggling to find a job at a law firm. Now he's a law clerk at the district court, trying to fix up his resume. He might be able to help out. Speeding things up might mess things up, but if the judge insists on getting live testimony, the whole case could fall apart. Linda will need to decide to stop fighting for some reason if she figures out what's really going on. If things go south at this point, I might have to quit as your lawyer, which is fair enough. Someday you can spill the whole story to me, but I don't want to hear it right now. In the next 2 weeks, Nick managed to keep Linda at a distance, sending her random text messages at weird times. I know he was busy, but he still answered her calls. As days passed, she called less and less. You really freaked her out, Frank. Frank told him at the end of the week that, according to our video footage, Dwayne hasn't been in the house since you showed up and surprised them on Tuesday morning. I can't tell if they meet at his house during the week or have sex with each other in the office, but they don't do it at home. I'll let you know if anything changes. The only thing that changed was that Nick went quiet. Nick went back to the house after finding out Linda had split. He grabbed some financial papers he thought he might need, and also sealed the deal to sell the house with Sam Granger. The closing was set for when Linda was off gallivanting in France during her first week there. In the evenings, Nick hit up the gym, read whenever he had some downtime, and pondered how he ended up at 30 years old with such a mess of a life. He told Sven he needed a few more weeks to chill, which Sven reluctantly agreed to. She's enjoying having him back in the house, Frank commented. Next Saturday before Linda was supposed to head to Paris, thanks for the heads up, Nick replied. I don't really care, but I'd rather burn the sheets than sell them when I leave the house. By now, Nick had already watched the video Frank gave him. The first time, he could see the appeal. Dwayne was a bit younger, and Frank's investigation showed that he was a regular at the gym, always checking himself out in the mirror before hitting the weights. Other than that, he was pretty average. Nick was intrigued. He was in pretty good shape, but definitely didn't have a six-pack abs. Clearly, Linda was only interested in a good bargain. Nick could have done without her shallow attitude. Before he knew it, Linda was off on her long-awaited trip to Paris. One of Frank's guys followed her to the airport and watched as her plane took off for Europe. When Nick heard the news, he went back to the house, threw all of Linda's clothes in a pile in the living room, and grabbed everything he wanted to keep. The movers came the next day and packed up Linda's stuff. They packed up Nick's clothes in boxes and sent them to the warehouse. They packed up Nick's stuff separately and moved it to the apartment he found with the help of Sam Granger, who's good at tearing down houses. With Sam's help, Nick was able to sell the furniture easily once the house was empty. Before finishing up his final task, Nick took one last stroll around the neighborhood. He made sure to grab the wedding photos, album, and Linda's wedding dress. He took them to the fire pit on the patio under the treehouse and carefully placed the photos and album there. So, Nick threw some charcoal on the grill, added the lighter fluid, and lit a match. After it all burned down, he was happy to see that the video had all the little details. You could even see their special moments in each photo as it was added to the mix. The next day, Nick sold his family home with his wife's power of attorney, signing as her representative. She really should have read everything she signed, especially the financial stuff. With a separate financial power of attorney, Nick was able to deposit the funds. So basically, this guy cashed the check from selling their house and put it in his own account, pretending it was for his wife. He also closed their joint accounts just 3 days after his wife left for France. Then, a construction crew came and tore down the house, cleared the rubble, and started preparing the site for something new. Unfortunately, they had to cut down a tree that was perfect for kids, and there was a gazebo on the new site where their happy home used to be. So basically, the construction on that big plot of land just suddenly stopped. Looks like there was some issue with the permits or something. Nick and his buddy from law school, who works in the county permit office, were sure that it would get sorted out once Linda got back from France and they got the right forms approved. But here's the kicker: Nick didn't pick up any of Linda's calls, stopped texting her, didn't reply to emails, and even ignored her voicemails the whole time. So, some of her peeps and fam hit up Nick and he just shot back a message saying he's mad busy and on the move all the time. So, they shouldn't bother trying to roll up to his crib to see him. El Diablo hit him up on his burner phone and mentioned how Linda and Dwayne seemed hella stressed out and not looking good. Maybe she thought something was up. Nick was like, "How you know that?" El Diablo just said he's got connections everywhere, even in Europe. He did ask Nick if he was down to come back Linda's wedding. So, Nick said no to the engagement rings, and El Diablo asked if it was cool for someone else to buy them. Hell no, Nick said. Fine, El Diablo thought, maybe I know someone who would want them. 2 days before Linda was supposed to come back from Paris, Nick was in Harry's office. "I don't know how the hell this happened, but here's the divorce decree," Harry said. "This is much quicker than usual for this kind of case." Seth stayed quiet. "I don't want to know," he said. "Don't ask. Just count yourself lucky and congratulate yourself on being single again. Here's the copy I'm going to send. Hey man, your ex-wife is gonna be so happy." Nick was leaving Harry's office when his phone rang. He didn't know the number, but when he picked up, he heard El Diablo's voice. "Nick, you need to take a break right now. Go somewhere with lots of people who know you and can vouch for your whereabouts." El Diablo hung up, and Nick realized it had been ages since he saw his college buddies in New York. Luckily, his schedule was free for the next few days. So, Nick decided to go on a trip that day. He checked out a bunch of exhibitions, hit up some museums, and grabbed meals with different groups of friends, mostly paying with his credit card. He made sure to tip well at his hotel, so everyone knew who he was. While he was there, he sent a DVD to Linda's parents showing him burning her wedding stuff. After chilling in Little Italy with some coffee and pastries, Nick's phone started ringing on a late Sunday evening. "Hey, is Nick, Linda's dad. Where you at, Linda? She's losing it, man. She's in the hospital. Oh damn, what's up with her? It's crazy, man. She came back from her trip on Friday, but her and her coworker got kidnapped at the airport. They were messed up on something and just got released this morning. Her coworker got beat up bad, almost to death. And Linda," her dad's voice broke. Back in the day, Nick would have shown some empathy. What the hell happened to Linda? She woke up and found herself all messed up. From head to toe covered in tattoos with awful phrases, she woke up to find a masked guy hitting her in the nose, breaking it. Then, with 2 more punches, he gave her 2 black eyes. Impressive, Nick thought. It was the icing on the cake. He would be thrilled if Linda knew he cheated on her, just like she did in their marriage. It would be worth a damn if he had a soul to sell. Sorry to hear that, I'm out of town at the moment. What do you want me to do? Nick could tell there was something off. Guess what, buddy? Your wife's been playing around behind your back. We're done, got the divorce papers last week. She's off fooling around with some dude she's traveling with. What part do you not get? Nick knew he was being harsh, but he didn't give a damn. I've got a video of her getting it on like a cat, and it ain't with me. Want a copy? Silence on the other end. Nick wondered if his father-in-law had a heart attack. We're done dealing with her, so you'll have to take her home. Check, not my problem now. You did it, his father-in-law shouted. I've been in New York since Wednesday celebrating my divorce. Look, I know you're upset and I hope Linda gets better soon, but I don't think we have anything else to say to each other. He hung up. At that moment, it occurred to Nick that the stress of city life had recently become too much. He sent an email to Sven, saying that in the end, Sven and the firm could go to hell, with all due respect. A quick Google search showed Nick that there was an REI store in Soho, so he got himself some fresh hiking and camping gear. Linda wasn't into hiking, so this was his chance to get back in touch with his outdoors side. The hotel was cool enough to hold onto his bags for a bit for a fair price, and before he knew it, he was off to the Adra Mountains to chill out with nature until things settled down. Good thing he had his passport in case he wanted to hop over to Canada, and turns out, he did. He ended up spending some time there. Nick spent most of the next 8 weeks ignoring his phone. At first, it seemed like some psycho lady had taken his ex-wife's phone because there were tons, maybe even hundreds, he lost count, of messages that sounded like she was freaking out and crying. He only listened to a couple before deleting the rest, along with a bunch of insane emails. Her account must have been hacked. How was he supposed to find the time to deal with all this drama? He hoped that whoever this crazy lady was, she got the help she obviously needed. So, 8 weeks later, Nick finally met up with Frank. Harry was at the bar too, just so you know, Harry said as they took a seat. I ended our lawyer-client thing right after I gave you the divorce papers. I let you know by mail, maybe you haven't seen it yet. Not yet, Nick confessed. It's a big storm, my buddy said. More like a typhoon, added Harry. Lots of damage. Harry downed his bourbon and ordered another. You start, Frank. So, on Monday morning, Mrs. Buford showed up. So, she went back to her parents' place, the one they used to live in. We forgot to take down the security camera outside. When she saw the empty lot, she just lost it. Dropped to the ground, crying her eyes out, curled up in a ball. Then she starts kicking and screaming like a little kid at the mall, all in the evening. Next thing you know, a bunch of workers show up with their tools and she goes nuts again. And when they see the tattoo on her face, they burst out laughing, even though she's got those dark circles under her eyes. So, this chick with a busted nose shows up at my office with her crew of fancy lawyer types, looking all tough. They didn't even schedule an appointment, so I made them wait for like 25 minutes. I made sure my Glock was ready on my desk, thank goodness we're in Virginia. After the wait, they start freaking out at me, going on about some urgent legal stuff. I gotta say, it was hard not to stare at all the tattoos she had. So I saw this with my own eyes, it was written in red and blue ink so it would stand out from far away. When I managed to clear my head, I asked what the deal was and if any of their statements were lies. They all just stared at each other, so I straight up asked if there was drama about the ex-wife cheating. They all admitted it, so I showed them a video I had ready of good old Linda getting it on with someone who ain't her husband in their own bed. Clearly, they were clueless. So, I checked out everything in the case file, right? And then they all just seemed puzzled. And then Linda starts freaking out, saying you didn't even let her explain herself. And I was like, you don't care about the reason, you just did it. Then she snapped out of it and started saying she never agreed to let you sell the house. And what's the deal with you burning her wedding dress photos and album? All that stuff was her personal property. I showed her copies of the powers of attorney, one of which was for the specific purpose of So, when I was trying to sell the house, I showed her the paperwork that said you could do whatever you wanted with her stuff, and I told her she should be grateful she even got to keep her clothes. I asked her if she was denying that she signed the papers, and she said no, but she claimed she didn't agree with what was written. So I asked her if her whole argument was that she didn't bother to read what she was signing. I warned her about how bad it would look if she tried to fight it in court, and then she went quiet. I showed her the paper she signed admitting her man was upstairs when she signed it. I asked if it was true, and that's when she passed out. Her friends tried to wake her up, but I had already called 911. She didn't want to go to the hospital with them, but then she started yelling about tattoos and her man getting beat up. I told her it had nothing to do with her, since she was out of town and maybe Dwayne pissed off some husband or another wife caught him cheating. So there was this lady who was jealous of Linda for stealing Dwayne from her. I told them to go to the Fairfax police if they had any legal issues to talk about. Then it got even juicier. Harry kept going on about filing a motion for reconsideration and all that legal mumbo-jumbo. That's when I dropped the bombshell that I got an anonymous email that morning with videos of Linda and Dwayne getting it on in your bed before the trip. The message to Paris basically said that they were gonna send embarrassing videos to all of Linda's friends, and you Nick had no idea and couldn't do anything to stop it. They claimed to be friends that you had helped in the past, and they promised to protect you. They threatened to send the videos that day if Linda didn't just let it go. Do you have any clue about this? I was away when it all went down. After they left, I never heard from them again and nothing happened in court. It was Frank's turn once more. They must have been bluffing. So, the cops were called because these two detectives showed up asking for copies of the videos and the report. But then they just lost interest. Linda and Dwayne couldn't really say what went down, just that they hopped in a taxi at the airport and the next thing Dwayne knew, he was in the hospital with Linda. She woke up in some shady hotel, got smacked in the face, and ended up at the hospital too. Turns out, the room was charged to her credit card along with room service and minibar. Nick mentioned that the hotel manager claimed New York cops had looked into Dwayne's stay. Crazy stuff, man. So, Harry was staying at the hotel and his friends in New York confirmed that he's been busy in the city. Rumor has it, Harry mentioned that your ex is hiding out in her parents' basement getting laser tattoo removal. The issue is, she's covered in tattoos from head to toe, so it's gonna cost a ton of money and the marks will probably never fully go away. What a shame, right? Nick mentioned this, and Harry just stared at him. Frank had to bite his lip to stop himself from laughing. So, what's the deal with your man? I get that he got messed up real bad, Harry said. He's gonna have to do a whole lot of physical therapy from now on. His head took a beating, with all those concussions. It's gonna be tough for him to find a new job, especially at Parallel since they let him and his lover go. Seems like their relationship went south during the trip, and it screwed up the whole arbitration. They didn't have enough paperwork, objections weren't prepared, and the witnesses had issues. They ended up losing the case, and the client was pissed. The firm had to let them go. Frank asked Nick how he dealt with keeping the client for future projects. I'm a bit annoyed that no one checked if I actually certified the documents before she signed them. I wanted to say that I saw her go through each one before signing, but I don't know how long she spent on it. Let's talk about this over dinner. I want to treat you and your boyfriend to thank you for it. Thanks for helping me escape, Maggie, Nick said as he backed the car out of the parking lot. Maggie glanced over her sunglasses and replied, "There's no need to thank me, you idiot." Nick stopped the car suddenly and looked at her, saying, "Really? Fine, shut up and just take me home so you can start apologizing to me for real this time." "All right, fine," Nick smiled, "but first I need to stop by the post office. I'm sending a card to an old friend." He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a card with the Boy Scouts logo on the front. "I asked her how she's feeling," he added. "All right, make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated with our channel so your second half doesn't betray you. And be sure to check out the next story because it's gonna blow your mind. Trust me, this one's just a warm-up compared to what's coming next. And hey, if you're not 18 yet, better skip the next one.